The judge said that the decision was made and gavelled. That day, I adopted my boyfriend, Joe. We both had to stop ourselves from laughing. He really didn't have a mom. She died 2 years ago in some sort of bathroom accident. We went out on the street and Joe happily announced that I was now his mom, and we burst out laughing. Since childhood, I adopted risk and dangerous challenges. It was boring to live without it. I tried to find an extreme sports fan like me, but Joe was so crazy that sometimes it was scary. But I definitely wasn't bored with him. Therefore, our relationship quickly turned into a plain chicken. You know, we did everything. I once even walked without a safety net on the wire between the skyscrapers. And he, for example, could eat a live frog. Now, Joe asked me to adopt him as a dare. If I got through a month and was a good mom, I could give Joe the next task. But if one of us refused the challenge, they would have to walk naked all over the city, and I really didn't want that. After the adoption challenge, we went to a coffee shop to celebrate, and Joe offered to live together since I was his new mom now. I agreed. At first, we hung out all the time and I loved it. I had been wanting to move out of my parents' house for a long time, but every day Joe was acting more and more strangely. When I did yoga, he would sit next to me and watch. I was cooking in the kitchen. He was sitting silently at the table. Even when I lingered in the bathroom, he would knock softly on the door and say, "I think it's time for mommy to go out. Joe misses you." Oh no, Joe, you won't be able to get me off balance. I won't fail the challenge. One morning, I was getting ready for work and had just opened the door from my room when I saw Joe sitting in front of it. He was looking at me. I smiled and was about to leave when Joe grabbed my leg and told that mom should stay at home with her son. I didn't know. Joe was such a good actor. I played along, hugged him gently, and said, "Joe, mommy needs to earn you some candy bars." Then he turned away and said viciously that I was acting just like his dead mother. I didn't think it was funny anymore. I ran quickly down the stairs, and I thought I heard Joe crying somewhere behind me. Flying into the office, I ran into my friend Eve. She suggested we go to the bar tonight. Yes, a little relaxation would definitely help. Joe was beginning to bother me. At the bar, even I talked to the bikers. The guys offered to give us a ride. Oh yes, that's what I need. We left the bar. I got on one of the bikes with a big guy, and the race started. We raced through the city, and I felt happy. Not for long though. When I pulled out my cell phone, I saw 35 missed calls from Joe. Damn, what if something happened? I immediately asked the biker to take me home. As I entered the hall, I saw Joe sitting in the dark on the stairs. He slowly stood up and began to approach me. I was scared, and he stared into my eyes and clenched his fist. He hissed that mommy shouldn't be home so late. I answered him with disbelief. "You're out of your mind because of this challenge." But Joe suddenly grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard that I screamed. I thought he was going to break it. But Joe jerked back and almost burst into tears. He began to apologize for being selfish, and his mother was right to scold him for it. What? I didn't scold anyone. Joe vowed to be better and trudged back to his room, constantly repeating the words, "Mom, sorry." I locked myself in and decided to dial Eve. I felt uneasy and decided to tell her all about Joe's antiques. Eve said it sounded like Joe really had some kind of mental problem. This was no longer a simple challenge. She advised me to leave as soon as possible. Who knows what else he might be capable of? Her words made me uneasy. I used to think Joe was just good at acting, but now I was starting to doubt it. I knocked on Joe's door. Silence. Summoning my resolve, I said that we would need to finish this game. I was terribly worried, and I was waiting for him to tell me that I would have to go naked all over the city. But Joe suddenly opened the door and started hugging me. "Joe, what are you doing? Mommy, don't go. Don't leave Joe alone." He continued. Then I put my hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Joe, this is just a game. You're worrying too much." But then Joe stopped talking and pulled away. A sinister smile slowly spread across his face. "Joe, stop it. This isn't funny anymore, okay?" I was about to leave when Joe grabbed my arm and whispered that I was a bad mom. "Let me go." I broke free and ran out of the room, heading for the stairs. I kept looking back at the distraught Joe. He followed me slowly. I was running downstairs, but suddenly I tripped and fell down. My vision went dark. I woke up in my bed. I was wearing a nightgown and Joe was carefully adjusting the blanket. I half froze. But he looked at me intently and put me back down. "I'll take care of Mommy," Joe said slowly. The words sent a shiver down my spine. With a trembling voice, I asked for water. When he left, I frantically searched for my phone. Fortunately, it rang on the nightstand. I saw the number on the screen. It was Eve. But before I could pick up the phone, I heard Joe's voice. Well. He came over, took the cell phone, and threw it at the wall. The impact made me wince. If Joe broke my phone so easily, what could he do to me? Then Joe whispered that Mommy should think about her behavior. Then he went out and the key turned in the lock. Joe locked me up. I immediately ran to the door and started pounding on it with my fists and pulling on the handle, but to no avail. Can I escape through the window? But then I noticed that Joe had taken the handles off the windows. I started to panic, and suddenly I heard the roar of an engine. Eve's car appeared under the windows. She got out of the car and rang the doorbell. This was my chance to escape. I knocked on the window and actively waved my hands. "Come on, Eve, look up." At that moment, Joe came out to Eve, smiling. Eve was worried about why I wasn't picking up the phone, but Joe said in a sweet voice that I wasn't feeling well and I was sleeping. I was banging on the window and I was hoping that Eve would look up after all, but she just shrugged her shoulders and went to the car. I felt doomed. "Help me!" I yelled in hysterics. Suddenly, the door to the room opened. Joe grabbed me by the hair and dragged me to the bed and handcuffed me, saying that his mother was behaving very badly. I screamed and struggled, but Joe just patted my head and told me that soon Mommy would calm down and he would live again as before and always be together. Joe came out and I was still twitching and screaming for help. I wanted to cry. I loved extreme sports, but this was too much. What should I do? Joe was a real nutcase. He didn't play, but then an idea came to me. What if I played along? When Joe came to check on me, I told him I'd figured it out. Mom promises to take care of Joe if he will be obedient and take the handcuffs off. My voice was shaking and my heart was ready to jump out of my chest. Joe thought for a moment, then finally released me and ordered me to feed him. Oh my God, it really worked. We went to the kitchen and I started making him porridge. I looked at Joe and gave him a tight smile. Then I handed him a plate. Joe was very happy, but as soon as he tasted the porridge, he got terribly angry, threw the plate into the wall, and started shouting at me, "You're making porridge with lumps again." I was so scared. "Joe, this is the first time I've made it." But he stared at me and told that Mommy had already made Joe's porridge with lumps. They then had a big fight. His mom fell down and fell asleep in the bathroom forever. What? Fell asleep? Then Joe got up from the table and started walking toward me. Damn, and then I realized Joe had killed his mother. I blurted out that I was going to the bathroom. There I closed the flimsy latch and looked around. Damn it. I had to get out of here. Then I noticed a small window near the ceiling. I tried to open it, but at that moment, the door creaked. Joe was rushing to me, saying in a crazy voice that Mom was too late again. In a fit of hysteria, I tried to smash the window with a mop, but at that moment, Joe burst in and started shouting. He wanted Mommy to play with him. Tears welled up in my eyes. That's it. I'll never get out of here, unless... Then I hugged Joe with trembling arms. Mommy had already made up a game for us. "Joe, you're a brave boy, aren't you?" He nodded thoughtfully. "Prove it to your mom. Take a walk on the ledge of the roof for your mom. Can you?" In horror, I waited for his answer, but he was suddenly happy and agreed. Joe climbed out of the window and onto the ledge, and I watched him. "Come on, Joe. Mommy is proud of you." He looked at me with a smile, and I immediately closed the window and ran downstairs. Without looking back, I hurried to the police station. Tears streamed down my cheeks. The cops listened to me, and we drove back to the house. But when we entered, I was speechless. Joe was covered in bruises and torn clothes. At the sight of the police, he began to cry and pointed at me. "Please don't give me to her." Joe complained that I adopted him just to mock him and even made him walk on the ledge. I interrupted him and started shouting, "No way! Don't believe him! He wanted to kill me." I was so hurt. Of course the cops believed Joe. He played so well. They said that I was deprived of the right to custody and took me to the police station. When they let me go, I went to see Eve. I flinched at every sound, afraid that Joe would attack me. But Joe was gone, and he didn't even show up for the trial, where I was fined and given community service. On the last day of my punishment, I returned to Eve with the news that I was moving to another city. I admitted that no matter where I was afraid every day that Joe would attack me down there.
And now I have been living a normal life without adrenaline for 6 months, and I gradually forget those terrible events.
I have a job, an apartment, and even a new boyfriend. I was just on my way to a date when I stopped at a traffic light. Suddenly, I saw Joe across the street. He gave me a friendly wave. I was petrified with horror. I knew that the light would turn green, and he would come to me. But a bus passed him. A second later, there was no one on the opposite street. I ran as fast as I could.
Ran through the dark forest with the last of my strength. Am I lost? I can feel someone watching me from behind the trees. These creatures will find me.
It all started when my parents sent me to a summer camp a month ago. I expected to find friends quickly, but by the end of the first day, everyone was divided into groups and no one noticed me. Even in the locker room, I was left alone. The other girls quickly showered, changed, and ran to the bedrooms. I was about to turn off the light when I saw a device hanging from the ceiling. Camera? This is the women's locker room. Who's watching us? I decided that I should urgently go to the administration and tell them about it. If there's a pervert among us, I don't want to deal with him. The administration building was pretty far, so I decided to cut through the woods. I shivered at every sound as I made my way through the dark woods. I kept turning around, but there was only darkness behind me. Suddenly, someone grabbed my arm tightly. I screamed in fear, but they closed my mouth. Be quiet. An elderly couple stood in front of me. The old man said in an alarmed voice that this was their camera and asked them not to report it. A year ago, one of the girls at the camp kidnapped her daughter, Beth. The police couldn't help, so now they have to search for her themselves. The woman took out her daughter's crumpled photo, the winner of a beauty contest. They really loved her. Not like my parents. They would have been relieved if I was kidnapped. Then the missing girl's father begged for help. The woman softly sobbed. The father gave me a hairband, the only piece of evidence the police found. But forensics couldn't determine whose it was. It had too many prints. Betty's mother looked at me hopefully. I hesitated for a moment, but still. We heard distant voices. The old man and woman got nervous. They handed me a piece of paper with a number on it and disappeared. There was no more time to talk. I peered into the darkness to see if I was imagining it. My parents called me in the morning. They pretended to be worried. Said they were missing me, but I quickly turned it down. I wouldn't be here if they really loved me. Like Beth's mother and father, I must help them. Our team was preparing for a volleyball match. Everyone gathered in the locker room. I didn't like sports, but this was a chance to find out who owned that rubber band. I pretended to find it on the floor of the locker room and asked whose it was. The new girl responded. When did she arrive? The girl took the rubber band and said her name was Sandy, and haughtily added that it was a shame not to know the captain of her volleyball team. I didn't like her right away. She will definitely stop at nothing to be the first. I told Sandy I wanted to be a forward on her team and lied about being a volleyball player. Sports aren't my strong suit. As a result, I disgraced myself at the game. We lost and literally got swept. Sandy was furious about losing. She called me a sucker and pushed me. I got enough from upstarts like her at school. But now I know for sure that Sandy is dangerous. She can't control herself. After the game, I immediately called the missing Betty's parents and told them about Sandy. Watch her was all I could make out through the static. This Sandy had a finger in every pie. She was the smartest, sportiest, and prettiest. Not surprisingly, she also won a beauty contest held at the summer camp. The jury was told that they finally have another winner. And Sandy enigmatically grinned. I thought it was weird. What do they mean by finally changed? I decided to sneak behind the stage. I crouched behind the screen and waited for Sandy to say something to her friends. The girls congratulated her on her victory. It turned out that she had been second for several years. Now that Stinker isn't here, Sandy said about the previous winner and won't be here ever again. Oh my god, what if she's talking about missing Betty? Because that photo of her was at a beauty contest. Sandy couldn't stand the competition and got her out of the way. That's motive. I backed away in shock and knocked the screen down. Heck! I tried to run away, but I tripped.
During that time, Sandy's squad caught up with me. I thought this was the end. Sandy pushed me to the wall. Mind your own business, okay? They threw me out the door, but I wasn't ready to give up. Sandy definitely knew something about Betty. But now I needed more evidence. In the evening, after the contest, I noticed that Sandy didn't go to her building, but turned into the woods. I had to go after her, even though my knees were shaking with fear. Sandy was walking toward the thicket with a shovel in her hand, and sometimes she'd stop and look around. What did she want in the woods in the dark? Suddenly, the phone rang. Parents! Heck! Always not the right time. I quickly dropped the call. I wish Sandy hadn't heard. But the sound was too loud. Sandy looked back and started walking toward the bushes where I was sitting. She was so close, my heart stopped. If she sees me, she'll kill me for sure. But I was lucky. Finding nothing, Sandy returned to the clearing, and judging by the sounds, began to dig. I watched her carefully from behind the bushes. She seemed in a hurry. Sandy looked around again and took a small bundle from under her jacket, tossed it into the hole, and quickly buried it. What are you hiding, Sandy? I waited for her to leave and called Betty's parents. I had to tell them what I'd seen. I could hear the beeps, but no one answered. I'll have to do it myself. I forced myself to go to the place where Sandy had buried the bundle. I raked the dirt with my bare hands and pulled out the blood-stained clothes. Oh my god! What does that mean? Did Sandy torture that girl? Or maybe she... In fright, I threw things on the ground and ran away. I wanted to get out of this camp forever. But what am I going to tell Betty's parents? I saw these things in blood. The next morning, I called the missing Betty's parents again. The number is temporarily out of service. The answering machine said, what if something happened to them too? I shouldn't have told them about Sandy. Now they might be in danger. And only I can help them. I decided to talk to her in a good way and let her admit everything. She was always accompanied by her girl squad and pretended I didn't exist. During dinner, I decided to approach her. You know, I saw something last night. I started, but Sandy interrupted me and said she didn't care what I saw. Well, Sandy, if you don't want to be nice, you've asked for it. I got a shovel from the back room and stood guard outside Sandy's room. I was lucky to find her without an entourage. You'll have to come with me. Hell no, Sandy said, but I threatened her with the shovel and dragged her into the woods. Every step I took, I became bolder, even more desperate. When Sandy tried to run away, I tripped her and she fell to the ground. She'll know how to mess with me. When we reached the pit, I stuck my shovel in the ground and definitely looked at Sandy. I know what you did. You're the one who kidnapped that girl. What girl? Said Sandy. I told her about Beth's disappearance and told her not to deny it. I have all the evidence on my hands. The rubber band, the beauty contest that she was prevented from winning, the bloodstained things in the woods. You must have seen too much whodunit films, right? Sandy said nervously. She said she just liked the hairband, so she lied about it being hers. The competition was previously won by the camp director's daughter, and now she's too old to come here. And there is no blood on the things. She smeared everything with paint to scare the younger teams. Sandy's words sounded plausible, but why should I believe her? Tell that to Beth's poor parents, I said, and pointedly looked at the shovel to scare Sandy. Suddenly, Sandy thought about it, and she said the story seemed very familiar to her. And continued, there is a camp legend about an old couple from the forest. They're looking for their daughter's killer. And each time they come back to take a new girl with them. What nonsense! I said they were stories for babies, but Sandy didn't seem to hear me. Startled, she looked into the thicket and backed away. It's not a legend! She yelled. Where's she looking? I turned to see an old couple standing behind me. Their eyes eerily glowed in the dark. My god! I ran as fast as I could toward the camp. Terrified, I ran to the buildings and turned around. The creatures were coming fast. Their eyes burned. I slammed the building door in their faces and rushed to my room on the second floor. I was packing my things when I heard a rattle. When I turned around, I saw their ugly faces. They tried to get in through the open window. I grabbed my phone and ran through the service exit straight into the woods. I don't know how long I ran, but suddenly I came to a clearing. There were guys from junior teams sitting by the fire. Their camp counselor was telling a story that it's forbidden to go to the forest at night. There live an old man and an old woman. They search for girls who look like their daughter and take them into the darkness. The poor thing who fell into their clutches will never get out of this camp. I ran to the counselor. Help! But he didn't notice me. No one noticed. Hey, I'm here! The old man and the old woman were getting closer, but I ran to the bloody camp again. Someone please save me! In a panic, I dialed my real parents' number. Subscriber unavailable. The last thing I remember is a terrible rattle coming from behind me. I hope my parents don't forget me. I opened my eyes. It was sunny and pleasant outside. Couldn't help but smile. Stop! How I ended up in my room when, thank God, it was just a dream. When I realized this, I remembered that I had a big fight with my parents the day before. I wanted to apologize to them, I thought. I went down to the dining room where we usually have breakfast. I didn't know what to say. When I saw my parents, I just started crying. Mom and Dad ran up to me and started uneasily asking what happened. All I could say in response was that I was fine. Everything is fine as long as my parents are with me. And I hugged them tight. I struggled with all my strength, but they laid me on the sacrificial altar. No, please, let me go. Mom. Dad, why don't you interfere? The freakout was already reaching for my throat. Is this the end? And I had so many plans for my new life. It all started when we moved here. On the first day, I told the whole class that I wanted to be a class president, and no one seemed to like it. My classmates called me an upstart and locked me in the locker room after class. I thought I was going to stay there until morning, but my classmate Kurt rescued me. He said that he was also locked in the school closet. After that, Kurt began to choke. I was so scared. He took the inhaler out of his pocket, but his hands were shaking so badly that he dropped it. I immediately picked it up and gave it to Kurt. When he felt better, he said that he was excited by the memory of the closet. From stress, he sometimes had asthma attacks. Afterward, Kurt walked me home. I was in a great mood. I think I had a friend. And I told him he could come to me whenever he wanted. In the evening, when we were going to have dinner, the doorbell rang. It was Kurt, with his parents. It was strange that Kurt came unannounced, and with his parents, but I was glad to see him anyway, and invited them inside. Over dinner, my parents and Kurt became very friendly. They gave us a book about the Aztecs and invited us to the book club. They said that at the next meeting there, they would discuss how sacrifices helped enlightenment. I thought it was very strange to discuss such a thing in a quiet suburb, but my parents really liked it at the club. They began to disappear there and made many friends. After one meeting, my mother brought a bottle of red, smelly liquid and said it was a rabbit blood. Yes, that's what I believe. Not funny at all, Mom. But at dinner, she put it in my face. She said it was good for the body and soul. I flatly refused to drink it. A couple of days later, Kurt called and invited us to spend a weekend at his family estate. All the members of the book club would be there. My parents were happy, and I didn't want to go to the fart party. I was afraid of hurting Kurt. Besides, I'd never been to the family estates, so I agreed. Kurt's country house was huge, a whole castle in the middle of the forest, surrounded by a high fence. Near the entrance, the guards asked me to hand over my phone. Kurt explained that otherwise, the internet would distract from live communication. I had to give my phone to these big guys. We were invited to lunch. I saw huge tables with white tablecloths and my parents at one of the tables. They motioned for me to sit next to them. What a solemn atmosphere. I hope they bring me something delicious. I'm so hungry. But they brought us glasses with a thick red liquid. I immediately refused to drink it. Then some crazy old man started yelling at me, saying that I didn't respect the traditions of the community. It was the elixir of youth, rabbit blood. So Mom wasn't kidding. To drink blood? No way. I won't. Are you crazy? The guards immediately grabbed me and led me out from the table. What's going on here? I called my parents, but they didn't even turn around. I tried to pull away, but my vision suddenly blurred. I woke up in a rabbit cage. How did this happen? I panicked, but I couldn't move. The cage was so cramped. My whole body ached from the awkward position. Why are you doing this to me? Suddenly, Kurt appeared out of the darkness with a bunch of keys. He saved me again. I started to run, but Kurt stopped me. It turns out that I insulted all the members of the club by not drinking rabbit blood. It was sacred, and the rejection of it promised the whole community misfortune. What nonsense! Kurt said that he was scared himself. There was nothing like this at the previous meetings. But it was too dangerous to run now. The whole area was guarded and we'd better think about how to pass unnoticed. He was probably right. Kurt led me into the house. They were all wearing animal masks, moving rhythmically to some strange music. A man in a mask with horns came up to me and asked me if I realized everything. I immediately asked for forgiveness. After that, I was told that I would have to make amends tomorrow. The community had already found some kind of task for me. In the morning, all the guests dragged some heavy iron cases out of the basement and put them in the cars. I was already exhausted. Suddenly, I stumbled and dropped one case. My parents immediately shouted at me to be careful. When everyone left for lunch, I decided to find out what was so valuable inside these cases. I opened one of them, and there were bloody human organs inside. Heart, lungs. I touched it with trembling hands. They were so cold and slimy. I almost threw up. I've got to get out of here. I couldn't find a place until nightfall. I flinched at every rustle, afraid that someone would come for me. I was beginning to think Kurt had left me. He knocked on my door after midnight. Kurt found a gap in the fence, and we needed to run right now. We were almost to the fence when I heard the guard's footsteps. They were getting closer. Damn it. We hid behind the rose bushes. The thorns bit painfully into my arms. I couldn't help but cry out. The guard immediately pointed his flashlight at us. This was the end. Then Kurt picked up a rock from the ground and threw it in the direction of the road. The guard turned around and headed there. And we ran as fast as we could. When the estate was already far away, we decided to take a break. I had no strength left and it was terribly hot. We sat down on a fallen tree and Kurt took off his hoodie. His inhaler fell out of his pocket. I picked it up and was about to put it back when I saw the phone light up in his pocket. Kurt, where is it from? Kurt, are you with them? I jumped up and backed away. And Kurt gave me a nasty smile. I was paralyzed with fear. I ran with the last of my strength, and everything went dark. I woke up on Kurt's shoulder. He was dragging me deeper into the woods. My hands were bound by his hoodie. Let me go! I tried to pull away, but he only got angry. He said that I was honored to be chosen, that my kidneys and heart would serve the stronger and more worthy. Then I remembered the organs in the cases. I started kicking and screaming for him to let me go, but it was no use. He wasn't listening to me. Just then, Kurt carried me out into a large clearing. In the middle was a huge bonfire, next to which was an altar. It was surrounded by people in white robes, the same guests I'd seen at dinner. As soon as they noticed Kurt, they bowed oddly in front of us. For a moment, it was very quiet. Even rabbits in the huge cases did not make a sound. 2 guards grabbed me and dragged me to the altar. No, please, don't. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed my parents among the cultists. Mom, Dad, why don't you do anything? But they didn't even look in my direction. Their eyes were fixed on Kurt, who was following me regally. I was forced down on the altar, and the rope was tightly tied around my arms. I was shouting for them to let me go. But then Kurt came up to me and the cultists started shouting his name. No, Kurt! Don't you dare touch me! His face was covered in sweat, and his hands were reaching for my throat, second by second, getting closer and closer. When suddenly, he coughed and began to choke. This was my chance. I struggled to free my hand. Isn't that what you're looking for? I was clutching the inhaler Kurt had dropped on the way. Let me go and you'll get it back. Kurt was frantically gasping for air. He just toppled over from suffocation. In the end, he turned pale and grabbed a huge cage to keep from falling. With his last breath, he nodded so that they released me. After the guards took the ropes off me, I threw the inhaler with all my might somewhere in the darkness of the night. Holding his throat, Kurt followed, disappearing into the trees. And then the cultists began to surround me. Their eyes glittered from under their hoods. I couldn't find a single drop of humanity in them. Cultists were coming from all sides. It felt like they were going to tear me apart with their hands. I was trapped. Their hands were almost touching me. But when they came close, then they suddenly dropped to their knees. My father said that I had taken power from the last priest, and from that day on, they would worship me. The cultists fell silent at my feet, waiting for the order. What a turn! I turned to where Kurt was crawling in the dark. What a pathetic rabbit. Grab him, I ordered.
If you are reading this, then I am no longer alive. I was recently adopted by Bill and Irene Morris, but I know something. They want to sell me for organs. All the children disappear from their beds. Talk to Miss Larkin. On my first day at the foster home, I found this note under my bed's mattress. The kids who had been adopted with me were running around and I stood there, frozen. My new parents, Bill and Irene, seemed strange to me. When I first met them, they were silent and quiet, as if they were hiding something. The door creaked open and Irene poked her head in and called me for breakfast. I quickly shoved the note back under the mattress and hurried downstairs to find out what was going on. As I was going down the stairs, I noticed the closet door was ajar, so I decided to look inside. In the dim light, I could make out several cots, each with their names painted on it: Johnny, Liz, Annie. But there was no one with such names among the adopted children. Whose beds are these? I immediately remembered the text of the terrible note. Back in the orphanage, I was told about people who sell adopted children for organs. I have to call the police while we're still alive. I knew the phone was only in parents' room. I have to get there somehow. My parents strangely looked at me as we ate breakfast. It was as if they understood that I had discovered their secret. I got up from behind a table and told them I wasn't feeling well, but I actually went to their bedroom. Closing the door behind me, I immediately grabbed the phone and dialed the police number. Suddenly, something creaked behind me, as if there was someone else in the room. I fearfully turned around, but there was no one here. A voice said, "Hello, it's police station." I whispered all about the strange parents, the note and the costs. Do something! We'll soon be sold for organs. But the cop apparently thought it was a hoax and hung up. Then I got really scared. No one can help me. I decided to pull myself together. So if the police need proof, I'll find it. I'll start with a visit to Miss Larkin mentioned in the note. That same day, I decided to find her. There wasn't a soul in the area, but suddenly I noticed an old abandoned house. The door was open and a sign on it said, Miss Larkin. I cautiously stepped inside. The house was terribly dirty. I went to the back of the room and there, in a chair, in the middle of the cats, sat a terrible old woman with sparkling eyes. I said Bill and Irene were my parents, and the old woman grinned. It turns out that they already had a boy, Johnny, who also visited her sometimes. He said that his new parents praised his developed lungs. And then he disappeared. Seems like he was sent to a special school in Boston. Disappeared? So the note wasn't lying. I have to save all the children. When I got back, I noticed a guy my own age standing outside the house. His name was Rich, and he arrived this morning while I was away. He was adopted too. His parents died in a car accident, and he had long dreamed of finding a family again. I was ashamed to say that my real parents just left me and went somewhere in Vegas. But Rich seemed like a nice guy, so I told him. Then I realized I had to warn him. Terrible things are happening in this house, Richie. But he just laughed and thought I was joking. Then I called him into the room as I wanted to show him the note, but it had disappeared somewhere. I was desperate. But Rich said he believed me and was willing to help.
But if we were in danger, he must make sure of it. First, we found in the internet that special school where Johnny allegedly went to study. But there was no one named Morris. So I suggested we search the house and we snuck into Bill's office. There were a lot of surgical instruments, some receipts, and cash calculations. And on the table, there was a notebook with the children's weights and heights. Do you believe me now? But Rich said it still didn't mean anything. We started arguing when we heard someone coming up the stairs and ran into another room. Rich said he'd had enough, and he didn't like the idea right away. We'd better stop doing this. I knew Rich wouldn't help me, but all my fears were confirmed. I had to run away from here today. Before dinner, Irene sternly called me into the living room. I was sure they already know that Richie and I had been going through their office. I went down the stairs without feeling my legs and found Richie standing helplessly in the middle of the living room. A nasty old man was patting him on the cheek. My parents introduced me and said that an elderly couple had come to visit us. They are their old acquaintances, and I must make friends with them. All evening, they asked us about their hobbies, patted us on the head and admired us, saying look how healthy they are. I was very scared. Why are they so interested in our health? After dinner, I saw how the old people give to our foster parents a package. It was clearly money. They sold us for organs. I waited until everyone was asleep and went to Richie. We have to run right now, without waiting for the night. I burst into his room, but he wasn't there. Suddenly, someone put a hand on my shoulder. My stomach went cold with horror. Oh no, it was Irene. I started yelling, asking where is Richie? But she calmly replied that he had a nightmare and asked to sleep in their bed. In horror, I remembered the note again. The children disappear from the parents' bed. Irene strangely smiled and added that I could see it myself. I didn't want to go into the bedroom, but I had to make sure Richie was okay. I cautiously went into their room. Rich was indeed in the bed, peacefully sleeping. Maybe I'm really getting myself in mood. I felt relieved, so I crawled under the covers to him and immediately fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, Richie wasn't there. I looked around and realized it wasn't my parents' bedroom. Suddenly I heard footsteps, and a long shadow appeared in the doorway. I immediately pretended to be asleep. I felt someone bending over me and opened my eyes a little. It was the same old lady who visited us the day before. I screamed. What do you need and where is Richie? The old lady hesitantly said that Richie was gone. She wanted to reach out to me, but I immediately rushed out of the room. I ran into the kitchen and saw the old man there. He was holding a bloody knife, and something that looked like a human liver was lying on the table. I backed away and wanted to throw something at him, but something wet came under my hand. Oh no, it's Richie's t-shirt. It's covered in blood. I darted in the opposite direction and ran to the second floor. The old couple was coming up behind me. Judy, come to us. Don't be afraid. Then I rushed to the bathroom and climbed out through the window on the ledge down. I'm almost free, but it was too late, and a car with Irene and Bill came around the corner. I ran through the garden, but they grabbed me and dragged me into the house. No, you won't get my organs! I was screaming, trying to get away. Then I heard Richie's voice. He was standing in the middle of the living room, all safe and sound. Richie began to reassure me, saying that he was now the adopted son of my grandparents. Irene and Bill helped him find a family, but I still didn't believe it. What about the knife, the t-shirt, the bundle of money? The old couple smiled and said that Irene and Bill were helping those who were not officially allowed to adopt children. They take the children home and then transfer them to such families. The bundle was a thank you pie, and the knife was bloody because the old man was cutting up the steak for dinner. The t-shirt was stained by Richie himself in the morning when he opened the pomegranate syrup. At first, the old couple wanted to take only Richie, but seeing how we became friends, they decided to adopt me as well. But what about the missing Johnny? And all those surgical instruments? Bill good-naturedly laughed. It turned out that the boy wasn't lost. He now has a new family. They live nearby, and he was given to swimming. But their neighbor, Miss Larkins, has a very bad temper. That's why they didn't tell her anything. As for the instruments, Bill is a surgeon and all the instruments are from the hospital. Irene hugged me and apologized for sneaking us to the old couple's house last night. They just didn't want to wake us up. We slept so sweetly. I sipped my tea in silence for a while, trying to make sense of what happened, and then I burst into tears and asked everyone for forgiveness. Irene and Bill didn't look so bad now. They hugged me, and the old couple gave me a handkerchief. Apparently, I was so offended by my parents who abandoned me that I completely stopped believing that someone could take care of me. But now I understand there are still people who don't wish you harm. And you just have to learn to accept their help.